Now it's time for the audio imposition on Newtown Radio. Every week, hosted by Eric and Edwina. Let's get it.
Hello, and welcome to the Audio Imposition. I am your host, as always, Eric, and I am joined this time by singer, songwriter, Mitski. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. So, how about that weather?
It's fucking cold. Am I allowed to swear on this one?
Not anymore. You had one. No, I'm kidding. It's fine. It's fine. You can say whatever. This goes out to the internet, so you can feel free to do whatever you want.
Yeah, it was fucking cold. So, the night before last, I remember I got off the train and it's like a 10-minute walk to my apartment, and I just like ran through the whole thing because I was like, fuck this, I don't want to be outside.
I think I gave up on this winter when I went to my bodega and I saw literally like a patch of frozen dog pee, and I was like, how cold does it have to be that dog pee freezes?
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, you should have taken a picture. Otherwise, we can't tell if you're telling the truth or not.
Or we can just wait a week because it's supposed to get like super cold again, and then
Really?
Yeah. Sorry.
I fucking hate that.
I'm sorry. Where are you from? Like, are you not used to the cold? Like, where did you grow up?
Well, yeah, it's true. I actually like grew up mostly in Southeast Asia. I grew up moving around a lot. I was born in Japan, but yeah, I spent my formative years in countries that like only have summers and have maybe rainy seasons and dry seasons, and that's it. So the cold is like, what the fuck is this?
What did your parents do that they moved around a lot?
My father works for the State Department.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that on the internet, but
Okay. I mean, if it's really problematic, we can go
no,
through and
it's
edit
fine.
it out.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I can't ask what countries, I
Oh,
guess.
yeah,
Or, okay.
You can ask. Well, I can't really. I don't know if I can't remember. It's also because in the past I've like listed the places I've actually lived, and every time it makes me sound so douchey, like, oh, she's boasting, when it's like my actual life. But roughly, I went to 13 different schools up until I graduated from high school.
That's a lot of schools.
So I guess that gives you an idea.
Yeah. Well, my dad was in the military.
Oh,
so
cool.
I had that same sort of experience.
Okay.
I lived like Europe, Japan for a while as well.
Really?
Yeah.
What part?
I don't actually know like where it's located, but it was Yokohama.
Oh, I lived in Yokohama for a year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The big military base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Camp Zama. Not
Yeah.
Camp Zama. Camp Zama is where we were, but that's not like the big one. I don't remember the name of the big one out by there.
I can't remember either, but I know what you're talking about.
But yeah, that's where I spent like from the most of my youth, actually. Well, not most of my youth, but like a large chunk of it. Most of my youth was actually spent in Texas.
Cool. So we're like part of the same ilk, although among the community, like the military brats and like the
State Departments, yeah.
like have a little like separation there. Like we're not of the same community.
That's probably true. I mean, I don't like when I was there, when I was so young, like I just had friends. I don't think that there was any sort of delineation amongst like who's the parents like worked for or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really weird. Like if you go back and you think about it, like just because we were like just a bunch of, kids, like adolescent kids, and we lived like we were essentially secluded on this base in Japan. Like I don't want to say like an oasis, because that's like just totally the wrong term for it, but like
seems like a different country almost.
Yeah, like the green zone. But I mean, even that sounds horrible. I mean, because it's Japan, it's not like wherever.
No, but that's like what it's called. So
Oh, all right, good.
I think I've heard it being called that. Yeah.
So I don't know like what the proper term, on base, I guess, is probably the most accurate, depoliticized, and even that's political, like term for what it could possibly be. Yeah. But yeah, so you kind of grow up and you are, I guess, like I was super familiar with culture of Japan, but not like of it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the main difference between like State Department brats and military brats, just because I never lived on a base. So And also my mother was Japanese, so in Japan, like, I guess I actually lived in Japan because I felt I could speak the language, you know. I also like lived with my grandma, who lives in like the way countryside. So I feel like I experienced Japan a lot more than maybe people who just lived on the base.
I think like I have one like super strong memory of Japan, like being like way out in the countryside. And of course this is like my perspective like many years later. So I have no idea as to where it actually was. I just remember we took trains and then we took a ferry to like another island. But we were so far out in the country that for breakfast we were served like smoked fish and rice. And I remember like freaking out because my food was looking at me. And that was something that I had like literally
the whole fish.
Yeah. It was something that I'd like literally never experienced before, and I think it traumatized me.
Well, you're here now. So
I'm here now.
It all turned out all right.
That's fine. That's good.
Yeah.
So how old were you like when you were doing this moving around? Was it like for your entire like growing up life?
It was for my entire life. I was born in Japan, but only because my mother wanted me to have Japanese citizenship secured. And then so the moment I was born, she took me back to the Democratic Republic of Congo where my parents were living.
Okay.
So, you know, I moved like every other year to a different country. So that's, you know, all I know. I didn't really. I used to have, you know, kind of like an internal conflict or something about not having a quote unquote home. Now I've dealt with it because I'm an adult.
Right.
But, it used to be an issue for me of a feeling of like belonging, and still, you know, there's still that. I find it a little harder to kind of like make friends easily just because I'm used to kind of floating above things and not really being attached, because that's, you know, a coping mechanism. I don't know why I'm treating this radio thing like a therapy session.
It's I mean, it's fine. The next question is tell me about your mother. So well, I mean, that's actually like one of the things that's really interesting, because I was kind of curious, do you find that sort of detachment from making friends? Do you also find like the sort of detachment from yourself as well? Are you able to like kind of like extract experiences from yourself and write about them more honestly, do you think? Or like from a sense of attachment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know. I think the thing is that I moved around so much, and every time I moved, I got a chance. I got a chance at a new start. I got to be a new person where people didn't know who I was, and I kind of experimented with that and changed who I was wherever I went. You know, I was in one school, I was like the most popular girl in school, and in another school, I was like the quiet girl who didn't say anything. And you know, I tried different personalities, so I feel like that led to some issues later on because it became like, oh, who am I actually thing. But it also created the opportunity to like explore different perspectives, because I realized that all of those people are still me, just different kind of exaggerations of who I am. And I think that actually helps my songwriting because, you know, I get to write from different perspectives probably a lot more easily than people who lived in one place. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I mean, it's just all for riffing purposes, I guess. Anyway, I mean, I'm not really writing anything down, so you know, you won't be graded at the end of this. However, there will be a pop quiz for our listeners, so make sure you're taking copious notes.
Oh,
not you. You're fine.
Okay, cool.
You're fine. So which personality did you like the best?
You know, I don't know yet.
Are you still experimenting?
I don't think I'm still experimenting because I live in one place now where I have to basically like commit to being who I am. I definitely don't think I'm the most popular girl in school. I feel like that was an act I could keep up for a year, but if I stayed there any longer, it would have like been revealed to be a facade. I don't know. I mean, I'm still a young person. I feel like I have the liberty to change, keep changing as I grow up. So I don't know.
So what brought you to New York?
Honestly, I hadn't really lived in the U.S. that much. I lived for a year in Virginia and a year in Alabama, but that was like a big
My condolences.
That was a big hazy experience. I don't even remember it that much. So I lived abroad my whole life, and abroad I didn't know much about the U.S. All I knew was that New York, New York existed, and it was a big city.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that had to be like really bizarre to know that your dad was working for a government entity for which you are like, you yourself are like so radically divorced from.
Yeah, it's still kind of hard, and that's why I'm very fascinated by America, and it's interesting how I am an American citizen. I have the passport, but I just feel like a foreigner. And it lets me kind of like feel like I'm a tourist when I'm on tour or just like interacting with people. But it when it comes down to actual patriotism or just like feeling like I belong or have a say in politics, it's kind of a weird dichotomy of just like feeling like an outsider. But anyway, so what were we talking about? What were we actually talking about?
I think I lost track because I was thinking about like other questions to ask you. But okay, so what? Well, we were talking about like which personality did you like the best, or what brought you to New York?
Oh yeah, what brought me to New York? So I'm
gonna start writing down notes for me as opposed to for the pop quiz.
So I was living in Turkey for my senior year of high school, but I actually graduated from high school early because I went to a military school actually for my last year of high school in Turkey. And I moved there and I realized I had all the credits to graduate. So I just went to the principal's office and I was like, can I just have a degree? And she was like, no one's ever done that, but I guess if you have all the credits. So I graduated early. But then once I graduated early, I was like, okay, what do I do now? Because at that point, I wasn't writing songs. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I kind of like fucked around in Turkey for a while. And then at the very last minute, I was like, oh shit, I have to go to college. But I think it was it was like the very last minute where all the applications were already done. And the place that accepted was Hunter College. I knew I wanted to go to New York City, and Hunter College kind of has like an all year round acceptance process, I think it was, or they have a later due date or something. So I went to Hunter for my first year of college, and then I transferred to SUNY Purchase.
Was there the expectation that you were going to go to college? Like, was that something that was always drilled into you by your parents?
I think so, because my mother didn't go, and she always wanted me to go.
She wanted you to have the debt that she never did.
Yeah, well, the thing about it is having a college degree, the 4 years of college, whatever you want to think about it, having a college degree as someone who's like not, in a privileged position is a very, very big thing. And so she wanted that for me because she never had that. But then I remember senior year of high school, I was fucking around and I just stopped thinking about it. And that's why I just didn't take it seriously. And I went to Hunter. Not that Hunter is a bad school. It's just it didn't have what I wanted to do.
What did you want to do at that point?
At that point, I didn't know. I just knew that I had to go to college.
So Hunter didn't have what you wanted to do, but you didn't know what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Well, so I just went to Hunter because I knew I needed to go to college. And Hunter was in New York City, which was important to me because I knew I wanted to go to New York City. And it seemed like it had a big, like, arts program, or I guess like technical arts program. I was part of the film program. And then I just realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I was just avoiding doing music because I thought it was a dead end. But then halfway through my
sick burn.
Halfway through my year at Hunter, I was like, I actually I shouldn't avoid what I'm thinking about doing every day all the time. So I just sucked it up and applied to conservatory.
So when you said earlier that you were when you were applying to Hunter, you weren't thinking about music. Were you musical? Were your parents musical? Did they play any instruments?
No, my parents aren't really musical. I mean, they enjoy music,
right?
But I don't really. We always just had a keyboard in the house, and I messed around with that. And I always loved music, or early on I caught on to the fact that I was pretty good at it. So I had a music education, and that I always took music classes, like advanced music classes, and I went to performing arts high school for a year.
So you went to performing arts and military school?
No, performing arts high school was 10th grade in Alabama. I went to ASFA.
Okay.
But that was just for a year. I wanted to try it out for a year. But yeah, so I had the musical education. I just wasn't writing songs, or I didn't think that it was something I could do. I wasn't really brought up to believe that one could just be an artist. So yeah, and then I don't know. I didn't even really write songs until the end of my year in Turkey. So, but I keep forgetting what you've asked me.
Well, I was basically just trying to figure out like when, like why you came to New York. Like why New York over like anywhere else in the United States? Like, was it just because bright lights, big city sort of thing, or?
It actually, at the end of the day, I'm actually a pretty unromantic, practical person in a lot of ways. I just knew that you didn't need to have a car in New York City. And I lived abroad, and basically the only two cities I knew were New York and LA. And I knew that if you lived in LA, you needed a car. If you lived in New York City, you didn't need a car. So I was like, okay, I'm going to New York City. Like, other options didn't really pop up in my mind. So I guess I was just not very informed.
So, but you had gone to school in like, so what was it like going to like school in Alabama as an outsider to that degree, to the degree like where your understanding of geography was like almost literally two cities, and then like you were like at this art school? Yeah.
So Alabama was a thing where it was 10th grade, and in 9th grade, I was going to school in Japan, and I felt like I wanted to study music more, in the school I was going to just didn't have that big of a music thing. And it was also just wanting to get away, like I was 15, 16 then. I just wanted to be on my own, and I wanted to get away and be quote unquote independent. So I applied to a bunch of performing arts high school in the US without really thinking of geography. I just applied to a bunch of places, and then ASFA took me. And they had kind of like a housing thing. Okay. And they had a pretty good support system for kids who were from far away. So I could just go and not have a car and just, go to school there.
Was it similar, or like how was it similar to doing stuff where you were like living within like the diplomatic sections of foreign countries? Did you see it as sort of the same way?
I felt like I had a lot less freedom in Birmingham, Alabama, just because, I didn't have a car, and I realized you really do need a car to get anywhere. And also because I was a minor in America, I was very closely supervised. And abroad, minors, in the countries I lived in anyway, minors could just kind of like run around.
Right.
And so I was kind of oblivious to the fact that you can't do whatever you want.
Far less litigious over there.
Yeah, and
anywhere else.
Yeah, and also in Birmingham, I found that Birmingham was. I don't want to say it's sad, because I'm sure it's a beautiful city. I don't know it that much, but what I found was a lot of like kind of desolation almost, or just like not enough money. And again, like Alabama itself, the country itself, like the countryside, or just, the landscape is beautiful, but Birmingham was kind of a hard place to be in as a young person. So anyway, yeah, I felt like it was actually a little bit more stifling. And also the room I lived in had Pepto-Bismol pink walls with no window.
Wow.
So it
prepared you for living in New York.
Yes. Definitely.
So what did you? Okay, so ninth grade you were in Japan. 10th grade you were at the
ASFA.
And then your senior year you were at the military school. Where were you between? Like, where did you go after 10th grade?
After 10th grade, I took a gap year from school because I realized I don't know. I didn't feel like I was learning anything. I felt like school was stupid, and my parents are kind of maybe a little too trusting, but very hands off. And I just said, I'm not going to school. And they were like, okay. The deal was that it would just be for a year. But anyway, I took a gap year. And then during that gap year, I realized, why it's important to have an education. It's not so much that you learn anything. It's mostly that how you're treated and your future is affected by, something as stupid as a diploma. So yeah, and then I went back to school. For 11th grade, I went to school in Virginia.
Where in Virginia?
Falls Church.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a blur.
Yeah. Well, I lived in DC. My mom was in. She worked at the Pentagon. And I lived in Richmond, so I knew the area.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
So.
Yeah.
Just curious. Yeah, my parents actually. It's weird because now my parents live in Mobile, so
cool.
So they're like,
wow,
right?
Crazy,
right? Weird coincidences.
Mobile, I've never been, but I hear it's like nice.
It's nice, but it definitely does drive home that you do need a car.
Yeah.
To go anywhere.
Yeah.
It's very nice, but it also, it has like that same sort of like, that sort of sadness that you were talking about. And it's just something that you can see. I mean, you can see it essentially anywhere, right? But it's just, I don't know. It just seems, I don't know. It's bizarre. Not bizarre. That's not the right terminology for it, but it's so different from my own lived experiences.
Right. Yeah.
That it's kind of jarring to like live in like the richest country in the world and to see that sort of like structural damage and so on and so forth. It's just so, I don't know, off-putting. Not off-putting. Cognitive dissonance, totally. America is X, Y, and Z awesome, and then you look in front of you and you're like, well, actually,
right?
That same sort of thing.
Like America is supposed to kind of stand for something, and it projects that image internationally and nationally, but then and we're kind of very much, what's the word? Not hidden from, but just like it's kind of kept out of the public consciousness.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's also, I would say, like partially willful. Well, not partially. It's like mostly like, I don't want to say like willful self-delusion, but it's kind of like, it's not delusion because you're aware of it, but you kind of try to ignore it. Like,
right.
American optimism, I guess, would be the nicest way of putting it.
Yeah, American optimism was, I'm sure, kind of a coping mechanism, or I guess, or like a survival technique, during and post-war. In that, if you didn't think that way, then you couldn't live. But I feel like now it's actually quite detrimental, because it keeps us from actually facing
engaging
things. Yeah, and then if we don't engage, we can't change what needs to be changed.
Is that something that you kind of approach through your music as well? Do you try to engage things do you try to strip away that sort of willful ignorance from yourself to try to engage that stuff with your music?
I mean, I don't really know. When I'm writing songs, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just doing what I feel. And then after they're written and recorded, I kind of face the consequences of what I've written. I guess what's been useful and also kind of detrimental in my life in general, but what's been useful to me strictly in the process of songwriting is that I'm able to kind of forget things and lose myself in something and just not be conscious or not be cynical or self-aware during those moments. And I really value those moments, but also it kind of makes me a little bit I don't want to say flighty. I want to think of the right word. It just makes me kind of
it sounds like it kind of goes back to that conscious detachment.
Yeah, totally. So, but anyway, that helps with my songwriting, I guess.
Let's go back to high school. Because I'm very curious about.
I never want to go back to high school.
I'm sorry that we're dredging all this stuff up for you. So let me. So you went to military school.
Well, for like a month or so in senior year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got like a month, and then you said, I have got all these credits to graduate. Let me out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why did you go to military school, I guess? Was that like voluntary?
No, it was just, it depends on the country. Where in Turkey, in Ankara, which is the capital of Turkey, that was the only English-speaking school.
I see.
And the with the State Department, with dependents anyway, they just kind of send you to whatever English-speaking school is available, and sometimes that's an international school that's not military or government in any way, and sometimes the only English-speaking educational system is in a military base.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a short break real quick.
Okay,
let's go ahead and play some music. I actually wanted to play one of your earlier songs from Retired from a Sad New Career in Business. I want to actually play Shame because I want to talk about how your music arrangement and writing has actually changed from your previous releases to what we have from you now.
Okay.
All right. So we will be back shortly. All right, so we are hopefully back. There we go. All right. It's always this mixer is a little twitchy, so it's always a 50-50 shot as to whether or not we come back. And Edwina is here. Say hello, Edwina.
Hello.
Making a rare appearance on the show. How you doing?
Well, it's actually 2 hours, so I can make it in time for work. Usually, if you have an hour show, I get here like 10 minutes before you end. So
how's your day at work?
It was all right.
That's cool. We have a relationship, so basically we don't get to say hi until now. So I took in the laundry, by the way.
Cool, thank you.
Should I leave or?
We're fine. This is what people come for. Yeah. So what I just played was Shame off of Retired from Sad New Careers in Business, which is a great title. And one of the things that really struck me going back and listening to your older music was the difference in arrangements and how there were a lot more electronic elements that seem to have been completely stripped away from Bury Me at Makeout Creek. And I was kind of curious if you could sort of talk about how you came from basically the sort of electronic, or as it was tagged, as you had it tagged, folktronic sort of background, to why you've gotten rid of the electronics altogether and that sort of.
The main difference, I think it comes down to my first two records were written on keyboard, on piano, which was my main instrument. And then I just made the decision to learn guitar because those are so much easier to gig with.
Yes.
So yeah, and so I just I thought I would write for guitar on guitar, and I think that's the main difference between the first two records and the third record. It just comes down to that practical difference. And also for the first two records, I had a different set of resources, I guess. More than the electronic stuff, I also had orchestras, basically.
Yeah.
I just had all these different resources that I didn't have once I graduated from college. So I think that's the main difference. It's just change in the instrument I'm writing for. Yeah.
So why, when you decided to start doing music, why the keyboard? Was it because you always had the one in the house, or?
Yeah, it comes down to just I didn't really, I never really took lessons. I guess I took a few piano lessons, but that was very short-lived. And then I just fucked around with the keyboard in the house once in a while, and I became familiar with it. So that not many things have been conscious decisions for me. So that was just what was available.
So what were you listening to when you first decided that, I want to try writing music on my own?
I'm not really sure. I think I was listening to something stupid. I was when I started writing music, I was a teenager getting drunk a lot, and I would just sit at the keyboard for hours while I was drunk. And I think I was listening to a lot of folk music, just because I grew up with a lot of kind of folk music around the world, because my father was very into those Smithsonian Folkways recordings. And then, you know, also I was listening to whatever local pop that was around wherever I was living. I think those are the main things that I was listening to when I started to write music. But I was always disappointed that the stuff that was coming out of me sounded so different from what I liked to listen to. And I always thought that meant that my music was bad, but I just came to realize it's just different from what I'm listening to.
So you've lived in a lot of places. So you've obviously listened to like a lot of different like pop styles, even though it sounds like sounds like, I don't want to say sequestered, but like a lot of it was in Southeast Asia, as you said. Like, is there any of that music that you still like kind of queue up? Is there any of it that you like sort of carry with you that's in your musical DNA?
Well, you know, it's conflicting talking about this, because on one hand, I relate really strongly to, you know, all sorts of different kinds of Indian music or Malaysian music, just because I grew up around it, and a lot of like Chinese pop and Taiwanese pop, and definitely Japanese folk music, Japanese pop. But a lot of this music, I feel like I can't take ownership for because I'm not from those countries. So it goes back to that thing of like always being a foreigner, where I like these things, but I am never part of those things, or I can't apply it to who I am or who my identity. So all I can really say is like, yeah, I listened to all these things and I really love it and it affected me, but you know, I can't say I know it.
So what music do you apply to your identity if there's nothing that you feel like you can kind of claim ownership of when you're in like these various locations?
I think Japanese folk music and pop music, just because I am Japanese and I did grow up with it. I grew up with a lot of my mother's generation of pop music and whatever like folk music I was taught. And then also American folk music too. Even though I didn't grow up in America, I am an American, and my father raised me on a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, you'd always get what was the U.S. like the English-based like media that they would always bring over. I can't remember the name of the stations, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
it was always like 6 months behind, like whatever was actually in America.
Right.
So if you had people who were like fresh to like whatever country you were stationed in, it's like they always had like the hot new shit, you know. And you were like, oh, I didn't realize I was so far behind.
yeah. But that's
cool.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I mean, it's just like one of those things that I'm just like really curious about it, because one of the things that I always try to talk to people about is like, you know, what did your parents listen to? Like, what did you listen to? Like, what do you consider to be like the formative music that helps shape who you are, like what you listen to? Because I think that like the music that we listen to when we're teenagers, when we're first trying to like scout out our own identities, are like, is like the super powerful stuff that you'll carry with us, which is why I think that, which is partially why I think that like music moves in like 20-year cycles, because like people like 13, 14, 15-year-olds, like 20 years, they sort of, before like the explosion of the internet and BuzzFeed and stuff like that, and all of the content was created by like low-paid interns, it was all done by people like in their late 20s or early 30s and stuff.
Right.
So I think that like they like, oh, well, I have this platform, and so I'm going to write about what is important. And I think that the stuff that I listened to was like really important. That's why you'd get like sort of, I don't know. It's hard to explain.
No, I totally get it. That's a really good observation. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very astute.
And I'm curious if that's why the nostalgia cycle is now moving so much quicker, because everyone who's writing for like BuzzFeed and Gawker and stuff like that are younger and younger. Well, not actual like teenagers, but like people like in their 20s and stuff.
Right. Well, also just like everything is accessible now. So almost like the things people do grow up with now are so diverse, because it used to be that you just had a limited amount of resources or channels that you could listen through. But now it's just everything is available.
Yeah. You really, like, I remember like really having to work my ass off to hear anything, like writing to bands in California, like with money hidden in the envelope to try to get like a tape sent to you. And then because it was, a long time ago, you had no guarantee that like the money would get there or that your record would get back, as opposed to now it's like you just do it over PayPal and you have like instant digital or Spotify and you just hear it instantly.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very bizarre. On the one hand, I appreciate that I had to dig to find all that stuff.
Because it meant something more.
Yeah, because it meant something more. But unfortunately, I would tend to inflate like I worked really hard to find this, and even though it's not that good, I'm still gonna like rep hard for it. Yeah, exactly. And I figure that you don't have to have that. I don't want to say like that poser, but that's not the right. You don't have to have that mentality. If you don't like it, you just move on to whatever else, because everything exists. Everything exists and everything is accessible. It's wonderful and horrible. You have access to everything and it costs nothing, and so therefore no artist can make money off of it. Right. It's wonderful and it's horrible.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's like it used to be that you had to have major label representation to actually be heard, because there was no internet. It was really about access. Although aside, now they're trying to like make the internet inaccessible or just very limited to, but we're not going to get into that right now.
I mean, we could. We are on an internet radio station, so it's very applicable,
But now the plus side, like you said, is that everything is accessible, which means that people or artists who would not have been represented can just put out their music, and that's why DIY flourishes more. But on the other hand, no one's making money. Everyone has to have other jobs.
Or two or three.
Yeah. Everyone's just very sad. Everyone's sad just for different reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's the way it's always going to be, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, because in Star Trek, they live in a post-scarcity world. Do they have sadness there?
Star Trek is interesting. We're not going to get into Star Trek, actually.
We have a lot of time to fill, so we could actually talk about Star Trek if you wanted.
Here's a fun fact. So there was very limited amount of like English-speaking TV, and Star Trek was one of it. So I was almost just like, well, especially for my father, he got like very limited amount of English-speaking TV for adults, not just for children, but or adolescent, so he watched Star Trek a lot. I still can't tell whether he actually loved it or just like that was.
So we're going back to my accessibility scenario.
Yeah. So I ended up watching a lot of Star Trek too. It's very close to my heart. But anyway, I think like in Next Generation, in like the first episode of Next Generation,
the real pilot or the Q episode?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, the Q episode. Okay. Yeah. They talk about that, about like how they
Sorry.
Yeah, they talk about that, how like it seems like they suggest that like almost like they've graduated from base human emotions or something, or like they imply that they used to be angry, or they used to have like jealousy or whatever, or they used to not have coping mechanisms to deal with these base emotions. Remember?
No.
What? You just let me go on and on about this episode.
Well, I mean, I was curious to see where you were going. So what do you think, Edwina? What's your favorite Star Trek memory, Edwina?
I am not familiar with that episode.
Okay, fuck all of y'all.
Mitski just shoved the microphone and has stormed out. His interview over.
Yeah.
So this is actually I am very curious. Like, what was your pop culture growing up? Like, beyond like pop music?
Well,
like, was it?
I grew up on Hayao Miyazaki's movies, the Ghibli movies, just because I grew up on the videos that were in my house.
Oh yeah, I guess that would make sense.
Yeah. So my mother was very good about like making me watch all of them, and I'm really glad that I kind of like grew up. My humanity was shaped by those movies because they're just such beautiful movies, and I still watch them to go back and like remember who I am. But yeah, so that was like, I think actually more than any kind of music or anything, Hayao Miyazaki is my biggest influence.
What's your favorite Miyazaki film?
Well, Princess Mononoke, but only I feel like it's only because it was the first movie I ever watched, and so it's like strong. But
when you say the first movie you ever watched,
the first Miyazaki movie I ever watched. Okay. Yeah. Oh, but also Castle in the Sky.
Yeah.
Castle in the Sky made me cry so hard, and I was so young that I didn't understand why I was crying, and it was like a whole conflicting thing where I was just crying and crying and crying, and it's beautiful now that I get like nostalgic about it, because before that movie I would like cry because something sad happened, or like I would laugh because something was funny, and then at that moment it was like it touched on something, that an emotion that I didn't understand but just was overwhelming.
Does that still happen to you? I'm actually curious.
No, I don't feel anything anymore.
Well, I mean, you've lived in New York a while, so
no, that still happens to me. I still surprise myself like how emotionally immature I am, and how just I've this year has been the year I try to just control my initial reactions about things. I get very emotional very quickly, and sometimes that leads me to do things that aren't smart, or just react to things. Yeah, impulsive things. So, and
so like why you said yes to this so quickly.
Yeah,
sucker. Yeah. Next time it's gonna be like, nope.
No, you guys are fine.
Thank you. I think my favorite film of his is Porco Rosso.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one too.
It's like, why is he a pig? Why is he a pig flying a red thing? And why is he the only animal? It's so good.
Don't ask questions.
Yeah, so good. That, I think Totoro. The first one I ever saw was the 1980s Americanization for home video of Nausicaa, which is called Warriors. It was called Warriors of the Wind, and it was
Did they change it in any way?
It's like 30 minutes shorter.
What?
They cut like so much stuff out of it. It's like incomprehensible. It's I'll pull up the box art for you just so you can see what they changed the characters to on the box art to sell it to Americans. It's pretty crazy.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it's like, well, I also grew up. Like I'm really old. I'm like fucking. I am Methuselah of the DIY scene.
Well, I'm glad you like survived. Like I never thought I'd grow old. I thought I'd die young. So
I think that a lot of people have that sort of mentality. Like especially if you kind of live. I don't want to say like live on the edge and make it sound like we're Point Break or anything here, but but if you have that same sort of like marginalized edge case, you just don't feel like that there is
a future.
Yeah. So you like, I mean, that's certainly how I felt. Like I was far more destructive in my teens and 20s than I probably should have been.
Because you weren't thinking of consequences.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you're a Methuselah, you were saying.
Yeah. So yeah, I I remember like living in Japan before and then coming to America before America had its huge Japan fetish in the 80s.
Oh, right.
So like we didn't like, I remember like when Transformers were launched and I was like, oh, I had those in Japan, you know, and they just didn't exist in America, and so stuff like stuff that I was used to, like stuff like Gundam and like just normal anime stuff that I used to watch after school, because it was on television everywhere, like just flat out didn't exist, like, in America.
So it was this new thing when you arrived.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah.
Have you seen Grave of the Fireflies?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Have you ever read? I don't want to turn this into like a have you episode, but yeah, anything dealing with I was obsessed. I still kind of am obsessed with like animation and cartoons when I was younger. So I used to like watch like anything. And so because of that whole like American mentality, cartoons are for kids. Like the most random shit would be stocked in like the kids section. So I'd see stuff like
oh no.
So when I was young, I would see stuff like Barefoot Gin and Grave of the Fireflies.
So dark.
Yeah, exactly. So I learned a lot about Hiroshima at a very young age. Yeah. And Showa does not sound like a fun era to live in.
Yeah. That was my mother's era. I remember, well, so I was in Japanese school until 6th grade. Even abroad, there are Japanese schools. So I was in a Japanese school in Malaysia when I was in, I don't remember what years. But anyway, So we as a school were made to watch that movie. Yeah, I think it's part of like the mandatory education of like, because Japan is all about like no more war, so on and so forth. Even though the politics right now are very conservative, but I won't get into that either. Anyway, we were made to watch it, and this is kind of like an aside, but we were watching it in the gym or some kind of big room, and I was crying throughout the entire movie. I was just crushed. By the end of it, I just had no more tears to cry. But this is the moment I kind of like tapped into like what it means to make it in a society. My best friend at the time was like totally dry-faced the entire movie, and the moment the lights turned on, she started bawling. And so everyone around her was like, oh, she's so sensitive, she's crying. And everybody was like petting her hair and like, don't worry, it's okay, you're such a nice person. Meanwhile, next to her, I'm just like totally just like blank faced because I'd been crying. And then that was the moment. Do you think
that she did it for like attention at that point, or?
Well, I can't read into like what she was thinking, but at that moment, there was that moment when I was like, oh, that's how you survive in this world. Like, I was just like, that's how you do it, you know? And there's a moment of cynicism that awoke in me at that moment.
How old were you?
What?
How old were you? Sixth grade?
Sixth grade, fifth grade, something like that, yeah.
Wow.
I just like, that was a moment I was like, wow, she's smart. Yeah.
Do you carry that lesson forward? Do you find that, have you carried that lesson forward, and do you find that kind of grates against like your, I don't want to say impulse control problems, but your usual like jump to judgment, jump to action?
You know, I'm aware of it now, but I still like am just not able to control my impulses the way that would be advantageous to me. You know, I just like, I wish I were smart enough or like just controlled enough to be conniving. But at the end of the day, I'm just like an impulsive child who cries the moment she wants to cry. So I like, now I'm aware of those like kind of like ways to get ahead, I suppose, to like, not to sound ugly, but
right.
And so I'm aware of those. I'm just frustrated at the fact that I don't know how to do them. So,
do you think that that's been beneficial or detrimental to your music?
I mean, to my songwriting, I guess it's been good because that kind of like impulsive emotionality helps in writing the moment inspiration strikes and just going with it. But I think I've been very bad about, this is my third record, and I just haven't been good.
This being Make Out Creek?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't really been good about, I haven't been smart about like how to market it or like how to put it out there.
I haven't seen a single t-shirt. No pins.
Making t-shirts right now.
Oh, really? What do they say? What do they look
say,
like?
Bury me at Make Out Creek.
Pretty basic.
I have, actually, if you go on my Facebook or any of my sites, I have a picture of Bruce Springsteen wearing it. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
That sounds like good marketing.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit about voice coils. Can you tell me about that project?
Yeah, we actually used to record in this very building. Not record, record too, but also rehearse. So that wasn't, I didn't take any part in like writing of that.
Right.
So at first I was hired by Sam Garrett, who writes the music.
Like literally hired?
Yeah, literally hired to be.
Like how did that relationship come about?
We had mutual friends. I think someone recommended me as like the vocalist. He just wanted a vocalist for these songs he was writing, so he hired me to sing for it. And then that turned into like, let's just have this be a band. And so, yeah, I was in the band for a while. I'm not anymore, only because I just like the Voice Coils trajectory has kind of like accelerated, or just like, you know, it's obviously it's a good band, so a lot is happening for it that I just can't do in my
right, because you've got your own stuff.
Yeah, so I've like amicably left, but yeah, so that was a thing for a year or so.
So what? okay, so let's actually go back to trying to plumb the history of Mitski. You get to New York. You graduate from college, and you decide you've liked New York enough to stick around. Like, have you made connections at that point, or not connections as in like business connections, but like sort of like friendships and stuff?
Well, actually, business connections are a real thing, because with the music industry, I freelance a lot, and with the music industry, it really is all about who you know, because a lot of freelance gigs aren't advertised. You just have to know someone, and someone has to recommend you, and so on and so forth.
Sorry to interrupt. When you say you freelance, like what do you mean? Like, what do you do when you freelance? Like someone will need a vocalist, and you'll come and you'll like say sing a jingle or something, or
yeah, it just honestly it varies, and it's varied for a while. Sometimes I teach too, and it's just like it's anything I can get my hands on. But anyway, so I graduated, and also I didn't have a car, I didn't have a license. It really comes down to the car, honestly. And so I was just like, I'm going to live in the city, because then I won't have to get a license or a car, because I have no money to do that.
CLA, you could have had Mitski. But your infrastructure just doesn't support it.
Yeah.
Sorry, LA.
Yeah. So that's
so you were writing and you were singing. So you were writing, you were singing at college. How many albums did you release in college? 2. Okay, and then
right after college, I put out Bury Me.
Okay.
Or no, I finished Bury Me, and then I put out Bury Me in November of last year.
Right.
Which is a couple months
ago. So did you just graduate last year?
No, I graduated 2013.
Okay.
I think, but I graduated in the middle of the semester because I was a transfer student. I had different credits.
It sounds like that happens a lot.
Yeah. yeah, that's my life. But yeah, so that's what happened.
So what do you think, so what's next for you, like musically? Like when you say that you have a tendency to, or you have the ability to write, like whenever you are, whenever you're inspired, like how does the songwriting process actually kind of go for you? Like, do you do lyrics, or do you do music, or do you have lyrics sort of kicking around at all times in your head, and then you'll just like write them down, or?
Yeah, it really depends. Sometimes everything comes at once, and those are a blessing, because it's just like you have a song done in an hour out of nowhere. But also sometimes I just have like a bank of lyrics and a bank of melodies and a bank of harmonies, and I put them together. And sometimes I have verses and choruses, and I put them together. And I mean, I imagine it's much like writing prose. You know, I feel like, I mean, I don't know what your process is like.
I don't have a process.
Oh, okay. Fine. Well, yeah.
My process is more like the impulse, I discovered this thing, everyone should know about it, and then I'll write about it, and I'll send it to Liz, and Liz will be like, I'm not going to run this. I'm just kidding. Everyone loves Liz. Shout out to Liz. Shout out to everyone at Impulse.
Liz is actually one of my heroes. Hi, Liz. Anyway.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So who else are your heroes beyond Liz? Like,
M.I.A. is my big hero. She's been my hero since her first record came out. All of my favorite records actually were the ones that I bought pretty impulsively, or not impulsively, but just went into a store and bought without listening to. And I saw her album cover, and I just got it.
You're like, this is crazy. What's going on? It's all clip art. It's all weird.
Yeah, and then I listened to it, and I was hooked, and ever since then, she's been actually my biggest hero. Because she does whatever the fuck she wants.
Right.
And she's, a major artist. She's a woman of color. She comes from a very different background than what you'd expect from, like, a pop artist. And she's very vocal about that. And she's so political and so openly political and says what she wants, but she gets away with it because, number one, her music is amazing. And number two, what she's saying is always very important and oftentimes correct, that it resonates with people. And I love how she does something, and at the moment, people are like, what the fuck is she doing? Then, like, 2-3 years later, other pop artists are doing the same thing, or just, like, copying what she was doing.
I feel that Kanye is sort of like the same way.
Yeah.
Within like hip hop. Well, also actually now within like the pop circles as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you just have dinner with like Taylor Swift? I'm like, what is going on? Like, I saw you when College Dropout launched, and you're hanging out with pop stars.
Oh yeah, Edwina has lived in New York her entire life, so she's seen stuff like Aziz Ansari's first ever stand-up set.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
wow.
So she's seen all kinds of like crazy stuff.
Some shit.
That's cool.
Yeah.
She probably has had fries with M.I.A. at Pita Place.
Oh my
Not yet.
god.
Not yet. Well, I mean, now she's a star, so now what's the point? You know, you want to catch them when they're young, before they've blown up. That's when you have the story.
She did show up at Spank Croc's pool party, and I have a photo of her and Diplo hanging out.
Oh my god.
The first year of pool party, so like 2006. Yeah. That's the closest I've come to her.
I'm dying inside already. Yeah.
We are actually running low on time. Did you bring music you wanted to play?
I mean, I brought my iPod. What do you want to listen to?
I mean, you run the show. Like, whatever you want to listen to.
I can't think of... I was listening to M.I.A. What should... I don't know. Do you have anything you want to listen to?
I mean, you. That's why I brought you on.
Ah, fuck.
All right. Well, let's actually do this. Let me play Voice Coils in sixth. Mm-hmm. Good God, I slur so much. Like my enunciation is so bad. In sixth. Mm-hmm. I'm like Daffy Duck. So let's play that while you look for at least one song to play. How's that sound?
Okay, cool. All right.
We're back eventually. Hello. Hi. Yeah, so we were trying to discuss favorite superheroes. What you guys were listening to Fight the Power. And we discovered that Mitski does not have a favorite superhero. And what we're going to do as a public service to her is we're going to try and figure out like who her favorite superhero should be.
This is exciting. This feels like the Myers-Briggs test.
Okay, so what... actually, I'm kind of curious. Why do you feel that you had to have a favorite superhero? Was it just like their rise in pop culture, or was it just like...
Yeah, I think it's just like a very like American thing, and I like to participate in American things to feel American. I don't know much about superheroes. I know like a few that have been made into blockbuster movies.
Right. Well, I mean, like most of like the early superheroes that started like in the 30s and stuff are actually barely by Americans, because most of them were started by Jewish immigrants, like living in New York. Like really? Schuster and Siegel, who created Superman, were actually like... I think they were either immigrants themselves or they were first generation. I can't recall. I don't know like that much. But Jack Kirby, who did like all the stuff that like the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and like all the Marvel stuff in the 60s with Stan Lee, he was like in the Lower East Side, and like he put a lot of that into the comics that he did as well. So,
oh wow, I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things that like I've kind of picked up by osmosis, because like, you know, that whole like I said, I was super into animation when I was young. And what is a comic book but like a still animation, you know, sort of thing. Actually, I have no idea how you would even go about selecting who would be like the perfect superhero for someone, because it's essentially you just hand them a bunch of stuff and say, read this.
I mean, like I there's a moment when I thought it was Spider-Man, but I feel like that's only because I was just most familiar with Spider-Man, and he feels like, you know, the loser-made superhero kind of...
I mean, exactly. He's like, he is essentially the everyman, or at least he was until like the 70s, where they gave him like the supermodel wife, and they started to make him successful, you know, and they kind of took that away from him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that like that sort of everyman quality is something that's like really important to Spider-Man's appeal, you know.
I mean, what other superheroes are there?
Oh God.
Just tell me all of them.
Okay. Well, there's Aardvark Man. That's the first one, obviously.
It's A.
Well, it's AA, right? Then there's Batman. There's no other A's.
Aardvark Man sounds so slow.
Right.
Is he slow?
I have no idea. I'm just making it up.
God. See, I don't know if you're making it up. You can tell me jack shit, and I'd be like,
no, jack shit's not a good hero. They retired him. They retired him in the 90s. They're like, we can't have someone named Jack Shit with kids reading this. It's not going over very well.
Well, Well, B is Batman.
Right.
They should have like a superhero alphabet book for kids.
They do.
They do?
They do. They've got.
Well, I should go home.
I mean, yeah, they've got a few. All right, so I don't know. I mean, like the superhero that I'm like really into right now is like I'm going through and I'm like experiencing like Sailor Moon for the first time.
Oh my god! Hell yes! I could talk a lot about Sailor Moon.
Because like I was too old for it in the 90s, like when it was like playing in America and like it was a lot of part of people's like after school routine. Like I was too old at that point, like so I didn't really watch it. And there was always that sort of creepy level, like, am I too old to be watching a show that's made for teenage girls, that's about teenage girls? And now that I'm much older, it's not weird at all, right? It's totally fine, you know. I'm just sitting there reading it on the subway. It's totally cool. If anyone looks at me and be like, it's for my daughter.
Yeah, Sailor Moon is amazing. Sailor Moon is quite amazing because, as a girl, it just like it has a lot of interesting like gender bending things. Mm-hmm. It has like a lot of like kind of like lesbian relationships, mm-hmm. but also like relationships that don't have to be sexual. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, although it still upholds a lot of like very kind of stereotypical like gender role stuff mm-hmm. about like girls and boys, but and also I watched it when I was little and it used to scare me. There's like some pretty dark material.
Yeah, those Negaverse monsters can be pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
Like one of the first episodes, like Sailor Moon's best friend, her mom has been taken over by like a monster from the Negaverse.
Yeah, that's scary.
And her head does this full like turnaround and you're just like, oh, I see.
This is for children.
Yeah, it's for kids. This is life lessons. This is all life lessons. Have you
I've read the comics too.
Okay. Cuz what I'm going through and I'm like watching them and it's really fascinating because one of the things that I didn't know when I first started watching it was that like the staff for the anime was predominantly like male. Mm-hmm. And so like a lot of the reinforcements of like those sort of gender norms are, it's like the cartoon is like the very male way of looking at the Sailor Moon story, whereas like the manga is like 100% like hers, you know?
Right. Well, the anime, the thing about making things into anime, and just like corporate takeovers basically mean, men taking over, but basically, so you can see a lot of just like male fantasy going into like the characters. You can see like that kind of projected onto them. Mm-hmm. I think that's like the main difference, and also just her relationship with Tuxedo Mask,
right?
And all that.
Tuxedo Mask is really kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't really do much. He shows up, he'll throw, like, I'm only like 20 something episodes in out of like 76.
No, he doesn't do shit.
He just throws a rose and like the monster freaks out and it's that distraction that allows like Sailor Moon to save the day or whatever.
And like that distraction is fine, but actually this bothered me when I was little. Mm-hmm. It really actually bothered me because
Let it all out.
Yeah. Well, because at the end, like everyone would thank Tuxedo Mask and I'd be like, he was just there at like the right moment to throw a rose and he stood by watching her do the fighting, and then at the end he goes, oh, it's no problem, I'll save you again, and it's just like, go away.
So I guess the biggest thing that you learned from Sailor Moon is about the patriarchy.
Yeah.
This is actually Edwina's radio show. I'm just
yeah, more so in the comics than the animation.
Yeah.
But you can see like with the animation too, like as it keeps going, the visuals become more beautiful and mm-hmm. complex and a little bit darker. I think I like the latter episodes better.
Like for the Sailor Moon R stuff?
Yeah, I guess. I can't keep track of like what mm-hmm. comes first and what comes after.
Well, the Sailor Moon R stuff is like where they like go back and they put a whole bunch of additional romance into it. Like I haven't made it that far yet, yeah. But the stuff that I'm at, like there's still only 3 Sailor Scouts at this point, so
okay.
So I haven't even got like
That's
everyone.
Exciting! I'm excited for you.
Thank you. I mean, it is. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I don't think I would have reacted to it well when I was younger, just because I don't think that I had.
the capacity to appreciate it.
I guess. I mean, what's the nice way of saying I was probably sexist without saying I was probably sexist? But no, it's like, this is. I think it was like this was aimed at a totally different audience than me, so I'm probably not going to like this. So kind of like walling myself off from it. Also, it's like everything is pink.
Yeah,
so,
right. There's just this sense of like this is not
gendered.
For me.
Yeah, it's definitely like gendered.
Well, welcome to the rest of comics for women.
I bet.
Yeah. But it's I really I don't know. I'm a sucker for hero things that have like a magical mythology behind it, and the whole like planets and past life stuff. I'm just a big sucker for that kind of stuff. So.
Well, I mean it's all there in Sailor Moon. So do you enjoy that sort of stuff in like other fiction? Like what do you read that's not Sailor Moon?
Right now it's kind of like the way a lot of people read Harlequin romances is the way I read like dystopian future novels. I just like
just sort of disposable. Like you read it and move on.
Yeah. Well, also I love the Hunger Games series because like I don't know, I'm just a sucker for like dystopian future things because I read so much into it. I read so much like politics into the Hunger Games series, probably more than like the blockbuster Hollywood series intends for people. And it's like the movies are still quote unquote problematic because like what's her name? The main character is just supposed to be like a brown girl, and in the movie she's a beautiful blonde girl. But well, I
mean, you saw what happened when they cast what's her name, Rue as an actual black person. The internet blew up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she's black in the book. Well, I mean, they did that to Jesus anyway, too. So I mean,
it's a historical thing.
Yeah, white America, get your shit together.
Yeah.
So beyond the Hunger Games, like when you go out on tour, do you like take like a handful of them with you, or?
I haven't been on tour enough to really like have a ritual but it's just I've been a lot of disposable stuff, a lot of like sci-fi stuff. It's interesting reading sci-fi dystopian future things because like it's supposed to be like on another planet with like different history and all this stuff, but it seems like the gender norms and like the white supremacy is still very much intact. It's like interesting how like it's supposed to be sci-fi, and yet like all these like rules of our society today somehow like apply to this distant.
You have to read stuff like Octavia Butler and Samuel R. Delany. Like you got to read like the rise of like the Afrofuturist stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't gotten into it yet.
And that's like where you start to see like people approaching that stuff from another direction, which I mean, it's one of those things like in recent years that I've gone out of my way to try to like seek out, just simply because like I've straight white male living in America, surrounded by American pop culture. Like I'm very familiar with those narratives.
Yeah.
I want something that's different.
Yeah.
So it's sending me out to like try and find all kinds of other stuff as well.
Yeah, and hopefully in the future we won't have to like actively seek it out to have it accessible. And it's interesting even in sci-fi. I feel like even though I read it like Harlequin novels, I also like notice the things that are in it that are like messed up. And it's funny how because it's sci-fi, I guess it's easier to idealize women and make them into objects. There's like, this like blue-skinned princess of another planet like wants to know what it's like to have sex,
right.
Like that kind of thing. It's just like there's so much of that. But I shout
out to Star Trek to bring it back.
Like I haven't read the 50 Shades of Grey books and I haven't watched the movie, so I can't really comment on it, but I feel like it's a similar thing where there's like a guilty pleasure element of it. I guess I shouldn't bring that movie in because I really haven't seen it. I've only like read articles about it. But it's just one of those things where it's messed up, but it's almost like you're programmed to enjoy it or like just like indulge in the fantasy of that. And it's good that I notice it, but when I was younger, I would indulge in these like fantasies that were created by movies, not just sci-fi, but just movies or books in general. And then I would think that those were roles that I had to fulfill. And now I can enjoy those things, I guess, without feeling like I have to be those heroines.
Right.
But I think it's like, it took me a while to get over the fact that I couldn't be those heroines that were idealized. Anyway, Sailor Moon.
Yeah. We're running out of time, and I don't want to end on that downer of a note. So what's your favorite Sailor Scout?
Oh shit, Neptune.
Neptune? Why Neptune?
Oh no, Pluto.
Okay.
It comes down to just like relating to the visuals of Pluto. I feel like
Pluto was the one that was the guard, right?
Yeah. It's just the short black hair.
Yeah.
And like she's just like quiet. I hope I'm not messing up the planets, but she's like quiet, but she's also like, the stereotypical Scorpio personality. I really kind of like that.
Are you a Scorpio?
Scorpio ascendant. We can get into
I don't know what that
horoscopes another episode.
See, in that case, I should have asked about what it was like. I should have you and Johanna Warren on, and then we could just talk about that forever.
Yeah.
We'll do tarot readings. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Actually, I should see if I can get her on.
I think she's in Portland right now.
Monsters. Okay, so we're running out of time. What do you want to plug? Where can people reach you? Where can people find you? What's the easiest way to get in contact with your music?
Oh my God. Just type in Mitski. Just think of it as the spelling is MIT ski team, which for a while was would come up before my page. So mitski.com, Mitski.com. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, all of the social media. I'm all about social media.
Are you on Elo? No.
I'm sorry. I thought Ella was whatever.
No, it's fine. So what words of wisdom do you want what do you want people to take from your music if they go and listen to it for the first time? What do you want them to think about when they listen to your music for the first time? Shit.
I don't know. Just I want people to listen to music uncynically again. I feel like so much of music listening is listening for brands, and I hope we can get to a point where we can just enjoy songs whatever genre they are. That I don't know. Also, if you're a younger listener, take pictures of yourself, because when I was younger, I thought I was ugly, and I refused to have pictures of me taken, but now I wish I had that to look at. So just even if you think you're ugly, take pictures of yourself, because you're gonna enjoy it 10 years from now.
That's actually one of the things that is also very fascinating that I could talk about for a while as well, is the rise of selfies and stuff like that, because I think that's really fascinating. Also the dichotomy of feeling that you're ugly and not wanting photos versus going back and looking back. I don't know. It's there's the whole growing up is such a weird, wild, dark country, you know, and it's and you're not trying to think about the future or how you'll think in the future about the time that you're currently living in. You're just trying to survive, you know. And even if you come from a place of privilege, it certainly doesn't feel like it, in the actual moments, you know.
Also, for better or for worse, sorry, we're running out of
no, it's fine. Go ahead.
Well, for better or for worse, now teenagers grow up in public, so all the mistakes you make and all the stupid tomfoolery you go through, and the shit that you regret, that you don't want people to know about, is posted everywhere and will be on record. That's horrifying to me.
It's horrifying to me, but I hope that it does is I hope it actually sort of desensitizes everyone to those sort of mistakes when you realize that everyone out there is literally fucking up all the time. That's my hope. I'm trying to be optimistic about it as opposed to terrified, because it's super easy to be terrified. Of course, if you read a lot of dystopian stuff. All right, so we are out. We will talk to you guys next week. And Mitski, congratulations on being signed to Don Giovanni, which everyone's just finding out about.
Thank you. Thank
you
very much.
We're looking forward to hearing that record at some point.
Woo. Okay, cool.
All right, we will talk to you guys later. Bye.